Hey family, so we're reading the Federalist Papers, okay? And it's a very important text, well, grouping of texts in American literature, history. Alright, we're still in Alexander Hamilton's essay, okay? We're on page 30. Should we be long permitted to remain in the quiet and undisturbed enjoyment of a metropolis, from the possession of which we derived an advantage so odious to our neighbors, and in where opinions so oppressive? Wow. Look at that. So, should the city remain? Basically, what I get from this is your city centers are not going to always remain in quiet, undisturbed peace, especially if they are oppressing their neighbors in order to maintain that sense of comfort. So, that's something interesting to think about. Should we be able to preserve it against the incumbent weight of Connecticut on the outside and the cooperating pressure of New Jersey on the other? These are questions that temerity alone will not answer in the affirmative. Look how he phrased that. Will not answer in the affirmative. It's excellent at his rhetoric. The public debt of the Union would be a further cause of collision between the separate states or confederacies. So look at this. Public debt of the Union. And such a debt is going to cause issues between the states and, if they were confederacies, the confederacies as well. The apportionment in the first instance and the progressive extinguishment afterwards would be like productive of ill humor and animosity. How would it be possible to agree upon a rule of apportionment satisfactory to all? There is scarcely any that can be proposed which is entirely free from the real objections. These, as usual, would be exaggerated by the adverse interests of the parties. There are even dissimilar views among the states as to the general principle of discharging the public debt. Some of them either less impressed with the importance of national credit, or because their citizens have little. Their citizens have little. Think about that. Now, today, credit is very easily grabbed onto, right? Attained, but not easily to lift. Tells you a lot. In any immediate interest in the question, feel an indifference, if not a repugnance, to the payment of the domestic debt at any rate. These would be inclined to magnify the difficulties of a distribution. Others of them, a numerous body of whose citizens are creditors to the public beyond the proportion of the state in the total amount of the national debt, would be strenuous for some equitable or effective provision. Strenuous for some equitable and effective provision. Equitable. The procrastinations of the former would excite the resentment of the latter. Yeah, something takes too long, you ain't getting it done, resentment builds up. Makes sense, right? Pretty practical observation. The settlement of a rule would, in meantime, be postponed by real differences of opinion and affected delays. The citizens of the states interested would clamor. Foreign powers would urge for the satisfaction of their just demands. Citizens of the states would clamor. And then other countries are going to urge for their demands to be met. And the peace of the states would be hazarded, so stability, tranquility, going to be put in a chaotic state, hearted to the double contingency of external invasion and internal contention. Ooh, look at that. So double contingency, so the double whammy of internal forces and external forces. Pretty obvious, yeah, yes. Suppose the difficulties of agreeing upon a rule surmounted and the apportionment made. Still, there is a great room to suppose that the rule agreed upon would, upon experiment, be found to bear harder upon some states than upon others. Those which were sufferers by it would naturally seek for a mitigation of the burden. The others would as naturally be declined to a revision which was likely to end in an increase of their own encumbrances. Their refusal would be too plausible a pretext to the complaining states to withhold their contributions. not to be embraced with avidity, and the non-compliance of these states with their engagement would be a ground of bitter dissension and altercation. Bitter dissension. Vicious altercations, yes. Embraced with avidity. He has very powerful language. If even the rule adopted should in practice justify the equality of its principle, still delinquencies in payment on the part of some of the states would result from a diversity of other causes, the real deficiency of resources, the mismanagement of their finances. So look at this. Some of the states would result from a diversity in their other cases. So deficiency of resources, so different states not having what they need in order to maintain their populace. The mismanagement of their finances, so states not knowing how to balance their budgets. Accidental disorders in the administration of government. Yes. And in addition to the rest, the reluctance within which men commonly part with money for the purpose that have outlived the exigencies which produce them and interfere with the supply of immediate wants. The supply of immediate wants. Like, you don't give me what I want, I'm gonna freak out. Delinquencies from whatever causes would be productive of complaints, recriminations, and quarrels. I rarely see people use recriminations anymore as a word. There is perhaps nothing more likely to disturb the tranquillity of nations than their being bound to mutual contributions for any common object that does not yield an equal and coincident benefit. Look at that. So, a common benefit of all. So if you don't have a common benefit for all, so if you're, okay, so wait, hold on. Being bound to mutual contributions for a common object, and if that doesn't yield an equal return, you're going to have some problems with your population. They're not just going to take it. It's going to make quarrels bust out, right? Essentially. You could say that with war. So that's an interesting tactic, because if a leader says we're going to go to war for X, Y, and Z, how are you going to benefit? People are going to be like, okay, I'm going to benefit in what way? Otherwise, people might say, no, you know what, this war is not for us. How am I going to benefit from it? But you're going to tax money and take away money from the communities to fund this cause. You could think of this in a number of ways. For it is an observation as true as it is trite, that there is nothing men differ so readily about as the payment of money. Yeah. Yes, it's true. Laws in violation of private contracts, as they amount to aggressions on the rights of those states whose citizens are injured by them, may be considered as another probable source of hostility. We are not authorized to expect that a more liberal or more equitable spirit would preside over the legislation of the individual states hereafter. If unrestrained by any additional checks, then we have hereto seen in too many instances disgracing their several codes. So additional checks restraining things in the states, and you shouldn't disgrace several codes. Okay, we have observed the disposition to retaliation excited in Connecticut, in consequence of the enormities perpetrated by the legislature of Rhode Island, and we reasonably infer that, in similar cases under other circumstances, a war not of parchment but of the sword. Look at that. A war of parchment, and then there's wars of the sword. Would chastise such atrocious breaches of moral obligation and social justice. Dude, the founding fathers said the word social justice. That's kind of funny. The probability of incompatible alliances between the different states or confederacies and different foreign nations and the effects of this situation upon the peace of the whole have sufficiently unfolded in some preceding papers. From the view they have exhibited of this part of the subject, this conclusion is to be drawn, that America, if not connected at all, here we go, or only by feeble tie of simple league, look at that. Exactly, you gotta have a deeper tie, not so feeble. Feeble isn't weak, right? So this whole You can't just have the circus be the union. You gotta have something deeper and maintain it. Offensive and defensive. Look at this. Would, by the operation of such jarring alliances, be gradually entangled in all the pernicious labyrinths of European politics and wars. Look at that. Jarring alliances. Alliances that just is like, why are we allies with you? Wow. Be gradually entangled. So it's going to be a slow entanglement of drama. And look at this. Pernicious labyrinths of European politics and wars. Pernicious labyrinth. Wow. You can't make it more clear than that image-wise. That comes into your head. That's like an endless... we go here, we go there. We go here, there's no way out. Just feels like you're stuck. And by the destructive contentions of the parts in which she was divided, would be likely to become a prey to the artifices and machinations of powers equally the enemies of them all. Wow, so if you allow yourself, your country, to become lost in this labyrinth of politics, and the way in which you got there was through a feeble tie, that you weren't really well connected, you're going to actually become a prey to a power that had a sort of equal standing to you wise, and they're going to pick you off, have that lunch. Divide et impera must be the motto of every nation that hates or fears us. Divide and command. So divide et impera means divide and command. Wow. Divide and command. So divide and conquer is one, but divide, not just divide and conquer, but divide and command it. You divide it and then you control it. Publius. That's the end of Hamilton's, one of his essays. Very interesting. Wars of parchment, wars of the sword. That's interesting.